Revisionist history, according to the AI overview on Google, which I imagine is 100% accurate 100% of the time, why wouldn't it be, is defined as reinterpreting or challenging previously established historical accounts by introducing new evidence or alternative perspectives. Well, ironically, I'm going to tweak that a little bit for this list, because since I am going to talk about accounts revised by, you lot, I think it's safe to say that we can throw the evidence part out the window. Instead, it's actually going to be me, the one who's going to present the evidence and, well, showing you how to do it properly. Got it? Of course you don't. 7 players who are overrated due to revisionist history since 2004. Let's roll on. Number 7, CR7. Hear me out, it's not that simple, but luckily enough, it's just about simple enough for chimps to you guys to understand. So when it comes to Ronaldo, him benefiting from revisionist history is mainly due to 2 reasons which run together. The premise of it being anti-aging, starting from the simple point of he apparently got better with age. Listen, as much as I love the guy, that's not necessarily true. To state the obvious, Ronaldo is a physically fit individual. His dedication to his body and attention to detail isn't just a part of his success on the pitch, but also his brand off it. But even then, believe it or not, Ronaldo was past his prime relatively early. Yes, really. So CR7's absolute peak was the 13-14 season, when pretty much all of the attributes that made him great merged in one and made him the ideal modern day attacker. But honestly, his decline began pretty much the season after, and by 30 years of age, he'd lost a lot of his pace, explosiveness, and by extension, his dribbling ability. Now please don't think I'm by any means blaming the guy. He has an irremediable condition in his knee that no amount of sit-ups or salad can cure. But my point is, throwing out titles like ageless or Mr. Longevity at him despite, 1, as I said, already losing one of his main attributes by 30, when Ian Robin at the same age was setting top speed records in the World f***ing Cup, while Kyle Walker at 32 is still keeping up with the actual real-life Ninja Turtle Kylian Mbappe. And 2, yes, don't think I've forgotten, moving to the Middle East at 37, when in comparison, Luka Modric was one of the stalwarts in the Champions League winning team at 36, James Milner topped over 40 games in the Premier League at 37, Paul Scholes came out of retirement and won another Premier League at 38, while Zlatan Ibrahimovic scored in double figures in Serie A and Paolo Maldini won the Champions League while in Serie A, both at 39. It really does put things into perspective. And stemming from that is another narrative that goes, he apparently peaked in his 30s during the 3P era. Now look, while that perspective itself has in turn been revised and altered as a result of videos of him skinning defenders during the Stone Age going viral on social media every now and then, the belief that still kinda stands is that the 3P era is when he became a pure numbers machine. Whenever people see that noodle here in front of a blatant Champions League atmosphere, they more often than not equate it to the greatest goal scorer of all time. And well, literally speaking, yes, this is the greatest goal scorer of all time, but strictly speaking, again, not necessarily true. Because you see, if we go by the numbers, Ronnie during the 3P era had 137 goals and 34 assists. In the 3 years prior to that, he had 167 goals and 47 assists, while also playing a lot deeper on average, thus being more involved. So, that of course begs the question, why? Why do people often remember the noodle hair Ronaldo as the stats machine of all stats machines? Well, first off, his big game performances during that era took on a life of its own, so fair play, man. But more importantly, as much as some of you clowns in recent years have come out with the tiresome, tacky and terribly toxic and triggering term that is player FC, we as fans even now, subconsciously or otherwise, still by and large prioritize collective achievements over individual glory. Because yes, while CR7 from 2012 to 2015 had better numbers and was better as an individual, he went trophyless for 2 of those 3 seasons. But from 15 to 18, he was the main man in the best team. And that, my friends, leaves a much longer lasting impression and, might I add, rightly so. Anyway, staying on the topic of the 3P, number 6, Gareth Bale. Only on the topic of the 3P. Otherwise, Gareth Bale's probably underrated more often than not these days. But again, on the topic of the three-peat, Bale was a sub for most of those games. And that is why it's a little confusing that most people often remember Real as having the BBC trio, Bale, Benzema and Cristiano, during those legendary years. Because in reality, that was only true for the first year. But then, following an injury to the Welshman in the beginning of the 16-17 season, Zizou was forced to change his ideas, came up with a 4-4-2 diamond, with Isco heading that diamond. And that was the actual three-peat side, being the starting 11 for 2 of the 3 finals. Hell, that was what all the fuss was about when Bale scored that bicycle kick against Liverpool in 2018. It was a goal fueled by his anger of starting on the bench that night. And yeah, look, speaking of that goal, the fact that he did all that and also won another Champions League before all that happened, where he was very much a part of everything that happened, Gareth Bale is no doubt a Real Madrid legend and one of the greatest players of his generation. But yes, as far as his contributions to the three-peat side, yeah, slightly overrated. Number 5, Franck Ribéry. He didn't deserve the Ballon d'Or, people. Stop paying attention to these nominations and make your own judgments, please. Franck Ribéry in 12-13 underperformed in most of the big Champions League ties, including the first semi-final against Barca as well as the final against Dortmund, missed a couple of key games in Bayern's route to the domestic cup, and while he was brilliant in the Bundesliga, was he really more impressive than someone like Stefan Kiepling, who won the Golden Boot despite playing for a team who totaled over 30 goals less than Bayern Munich? Of course he wasn't. And since he wasn't, as I've said many times, when you have all those factors working against you, you can only combat it with insane statistics a la Messi 2012. And while 11 goals and 23 assists is admittedly really good and was probably the Messi 2012 equivalent of Franck Ribéry's career, in real time, Messi 2012, it sure was f***ing not. Do your research, kids. And as I also said in that video, if you're a Messi fanboy desperate to discredit CR7's Ballon d'Or that year, you really should have just gone for Thomas Müller instead. But given that it is Messi fans I'm talking about, trust me, I understand why you didn't go for Thomas Müller. Number 4, Steven Gerrard. One of the greatest Liverpool players of all time, certainly. A man who carried Liverpool throughout his career. Not really. You see, in the 17 years Steven Gerrard spent with the Liverpool first team, I can honestly say that he was a true one-man team in just 2 of those seasons. But because one of those seasons happened to be the season where they won the Champions League in one of the greatest finals ever, where he scored the opening goal, lifted the cup, and what I feel heavily adds to the revised narrative of him carrying Paul throughout his career, he famously rejected a move to a better team to remain with them the following summer. Regardless though, if you attempt to assess it objectively, apart from 04-05 as well as the following season where Stevie had actually gotten even better and also brought the FA Cup home mainly on his own, he never carried Liverpool like he's given credit for. Because you see, Liverpool from 1998 to 2004 were mainly a very solid and organised team and had one of the best players in the world in Michael Owen in their books, as well as a couple of others deemed as being one of the best in their positions during that time like Robbie Fowler and Didi Hamann. And then after 2007, they probably had their best team during Gerrard's time there. You know, the one with the likes of Alonso, Hippier, Mascherano, Kite, Crouch, Barbel, and once again, one of the best players in the world in Fernando Torres. He then spent large parts of the following 2 seasons out with a groin injury, can't carry them if you're not there, and by the time he was fully fit again, he had to change his game as he wasn't the player he once was. While Liverpool again signed another one of the world's best strikers who turned in 2 of the greatest individual seasons in Premier League history. So, yes, he was always one of the standout performers, but outside 1 or 2 seasons, he wasn't the only one. Number 3, Ashley Cole. Thierry Henry says he doesn't get his due credit. I say he gets too much credit. Who'd you rather listen to? Don't answer that. Right, look, as much as I believe Ashley Cole's ability itself has slightly been overrated since his retirement, he was actually defensively weak for a lot of his Arsenal career, I, keeping in mind that this is a list concerned with revisionist history, will try to stay on topic. And on topic, Ashley Cole wasn't a part of Chelsea's golden era, people. Not only did he win only 1 Premier League title in 8 years with the Blues, Chelsea's defense were actually at their best in the previous 2 years before his arrival, a time during where he was at Arsenal. Which reminds me, you know how many full seasons Ash actually had with his boyhood team? 4 4 full seasons, where Arsenal actually finished with the best defense in the league in just one of those seasons. I'll let you work out which one. Again, look, as I said before, I do consider him a legend for both clubs, but I do think the reasons why he's often elevated to the all-time convo are at times a case of revisionist history. Best English left back of his generation, but far from the best left back of all time. Number 2, Arjen Robben. Had an anti-Brazil agenda a couple of weeks ago. I guess I have an anti-Bayern agenda now. I have neither, just to be clear. I'm just being honest. And honestly, putting Arjen Robben in the same bracket as Neymar, Bale and Salah is a bit dumb. I mean, if you ask me, it's pretty obvious from assessing his individual attributes alone. Very one-dimensional, very single-minded, and very single-footed, but that's not what we're here to talk about. Again, let's stay on topic. So I think it's fair to say that Arjen Robben really came to most people's attention during his time at Chelsea. But even there, despite being a part of a historic period for the club, he spent a lot of that time, if I'm not mistaken, around half of that time, on the sidelines with injuries. And even when he did play, he remained pretty fragile and very rarely completed 90 minutes. A trend that would unfortunately follow him to Real Madrid and even Bayern during his 10 years there. And that is my main point. Arjen Robben, even during his decade with the Bavarians, never consistently performed at the top level. Because not only did he disappear in most of the big games, especially early on, but as I said, he struggled with injuries throughout his run, not passing 30 league games once in 10 years, and even passing 20 only 60% of the time. And that even rung true in the treble winning season. A season where Robben only started half of their Champions League games and, get this, less than a third of the Bundesliga games. Sobering that. Number 1, Lionel Messi. Straight up, he gets credit for carrying Argentina in World Cup 2022, whereas in reality, while he did deliver in some big moments, he also shrunk in some others and was in fact carried out on multiple occasions. Here's the clip. He was completely neutralized against Saudi Arabia and was partly at fault for one of their goals since he was caught in transition as usual, or a little more than usual since he actually lost possession 21 times in that game. A high figure even for him. He did nothing at 0-0 against Poland but missed the only penalty he won himself, a penalty which, in a campaign where the Argentinians were lucky with many questionable decisions, this was by far the worst call of all, and as it stood at the time, Argentina were heading out and Messi simply couldn't do anything about it. Until, of course, his teammate, the gentleman from Brighton who looks like Aaron Ramsey but is named after the Home Alone kid, broke the deadlock, took the pressure off him, and surprise surprise, Messi began balling again. Similarly, he was dominated against Croatia and didn't get a kick until another dodgy penalty opened the game up, and despite his world-class assist in the Netherlands game, he was extremely lucky to have escaped the sending off as he avoided one potential yellow for a needless handball and one stonewall yellow for taunting the opposition while he was already on a yellow. Work that one out. And in the final against France, he scored 2 goals. One more dodgy penalty he had nothing to do with winning, and a goal at extra time that shouldn't have stood as there were Argentinian subs on the pitch. Oh, it's true. And speaking of extra time, not only did he escape another obvious booking, but he was one of the main reasons the game even got to that point since, once again, he was carelessly caught cold by the capitalizing and cunning Kingsley Coman in the lead up to Mbappe's second goal. And if you really want to nitpick, his legendary goal against Mexico could also potentially be judged to not stand as Julian Alvarez may have obstructed the Mexican keeper's view from an offside position. So, look, yes, the last one is just me being an absolute Nancy about the entire thing. But in a tournament where Enner Valencia was denied an opening game hat-trick because of this, not to mention every millisecond of stoppage time counting in every game, you really would expect VAR to pick at least a couple of these things out. There's also a narrative that his exit directly led to Barca's downfall as a club, whereas in reality Barca were very much on a downward trajectory when he was still there, and in fact since the very first season he became captain. Here's the clip. So since the 18-19 season, Barcelona's standing in the league are as follows. First in 18-19, second in 19-20, third in 20-21, and actually second in 21-22 when Messi wasn't there. And no, don't worry, I'm not daft enough to suggest that Messi made the team worse and him leaving resulted in Barca finishing higher. That was more because of Atleti's drop-off. But the point stands that the consistent negative slope in league positions shows you that the club was in decline with or without Messi. Don't believe me? Well, let's look at a few more indicators. So ever since the 18-19 season, Barcelona's points tally in the league are as follows: 87 points in 18-19, 82 points in 19-20, 79 points in 20-21, and 73 points in 21-22 after Messi left. Once again, consistent downward slope. And if that's still not enough, let's look at the amount of games won in each campaign. So, out of the 38 total league games each season, Barca won 26 of those games in 18-19, 25 in 19-20, 24 in 20-21, and 21 in 21-22. Still not convinced? Okay, screw the league. Let's head over to the biggest competition of all. So, again, ever since 18-19, Barcelona's performances in the Champions League are as follows: a last 4 exit in 18-19, a last 8 exit in 19-20, a last 16 exit in 20-21, and a last 32, aka group stage, exit in 21-22. Mate, you can perhaps brush off one of these graphs as a coincidence, but when several of them form in unison, you simply can't escape the truth. And the truth is plain and simple. Barcelona have been on a gradual decline for 5 years now, and as you saw, Messi being there made no discernible difference. There's also the narrative that MSN were an unstoppable force across Europe. Were they And one for those with long memories, he was said to have been an instant teenage sensation at Barca. Like, you know, a shorter and less spotty embraced version of Lamine Yamal. And listen, while his talent was always undeniable, his first couple of years with the Barca first team were pretty inconsistent. Here's the clip. Messi's first few years at the highest level were actually pretty inconsistent. In fact, not only did Leo not complete 50 games in a season until his 5th year with the senior team, but in winning his first 4 trophies for Barcelona, he actually only played a total of 32 games across all 4 of those competitions. Now, while this was partly due to Frank Rijkaard, quite rightly, protecting this young and up-and-coming talent from burnout and overexposure, something we in England do as well as brushing our teeth, scoring penalties and, I don't know, tea abstinence, there was another huge factor behind Messi's relatively slow start in life at the top. Injuries, particularly his hamstrings, which forced him to miss a huge chunk of the 05-06 season and actually returned to trouble him years later. And in between that, Messi also suffered a fracture in his metatarsal, also something which us in England do very well. Now, look, this is a challenge for all you Messi fanboys, especially the ones who never comment on the videos where I'm complimenting him till no end, like, you know, 7 best versions of Messi or Messi's greatest goals or whatever, but somehow never forget to pop up when I make the tiniest bit of criticism about him and or say something nice about Ronaldo. You are the ones that irritate me the most, by the way. Well done. But yeah, here's a challenge for you. Actually, 2 challenges for you. Number 1, get some sunlight. And 2, in coming up with a rebuttal to anything I said, clearly tell me where I'm wrong, while not whining and or mentioning Ronaldo. I know that would be hard, but what's life without challenges, eh? There's always a catch. And that is that. Agree or disagree? Beats indifference. So what do you think of this list? Are there any other players overrated due to revisionist history that I've missed out? Let me know in the comments below. And as always, don't forget to like, share and subscribe. Till next time, you keep rolling.